Good afternoon, and I'm so honored to welcome all of you to the inauguration of the Sino-American Cooperative Organization Plaque at the Mount Soledad National Veterans Memorial. Please join me in recognizing our honored guest, Radioman First Class and SACO veteran Kenneth U. Brown and U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant Walter Henry Travis Jr. If you gentlemen could start standing, and the rest of us will please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Mara Mesa Scout Troop 1212 and singing of the national anthem by musician second class Patrick Melton.
Hello, I think you can sit down now. My name is Carolyn Arnold. I'm the proud daughter of Willard Inman. He served at Chungking in Happy Valley during World War II. I'm here to say the SACO prayer written by Bill Barty in 1996. It's on the back of your programs if you wish to follow along. Hello, God, it's us again, the boisterous ones called SACO men. We're here today to laugh and pray, to remember you aren't far away. We're older now, but with a bit more sense than years ago without recompense. We all stepped forward and yelled out, "Here!" in response to the call for volunteers. You made us part of Miles Navy, Homeport China, Big Boss Dai Li. You protected us, then brought us home, turned us loose and let us roam. But at that time, you waved your wand, and among us all, forged a bond. That half a century has not changed, even though our lives were rearranged. So at this time, we feel we must say thank you, God, for picking us, and thank you too for sharing fast to receive our mates whose time has passed. And if there ever comes a time the world goes nuts and you're in a bind, just remember that here below, SACO Tigers volunteered to go. And so this psalm we now will end. But prior to our big amen, to you, O God, we salute and bow. To you from SACO, a big ding hao. Amen, and thank you.
Our first speaker is Neil O'Connell, the Executive Director of the Mount Soledad National Veterans Memorial. Neil served for 34 years in the Marine Corps, and at the time of his retirement, he was the top enlisted Marine at Camp Pendleton Headquarter Group. Neil?
Thank you very much, Dan. Good morning, everybody. It is so good to see so many people here on this beautiful Thursday morning. We've got a breeze. We've got visitors from all over the country to this very special place, and we couldn't be more honored to host you. I want to personally thank you on behalf of the trustees, our staff, the fine ladies here, our docents, and the whole entire Mount Soledad team. Thank you for choosing to have a plaque placed here on these beautiful walls honoring our veterans. I'd like to take just a few minutes and share some history with you about this memorial. I won't go all the way back to 1954, I promise you. But I must start right here, because to my right is Congressman Duncan Hunter. Congressman Hunter was instrumental in getting the legislation through in the National Defense Authorization Act in 2016 for us to purchase this property. I want you to just pause for a second if you've understood what's here. This association owns this land. It is private property owned by the Mount Soledad Memorial Association. We couldn't be more honored to be the caretakers of these walls with these 5,500 plaques, this beautiful cross, this beacon of freedom that represents freedom and our constitutional values paid for by the men and women that adorn these walls. It's a very, very extreme privilege, and we take it serious. But to have you here, men from the greatest generations with their families, the greatest generation. In World War II, our nation rose to the challenge. In 2 theaters of operation, the SACO organization, not a lot of folks have heard of it before, but the great thing about it is today you're still as close and loyal and patriotic as you were when you stepped on that aircraft or that vessel to go abroad. And we thank you. Semper Fi, sir. Walt, thank you, sir, for being here. Thank you. But again, I'd like to just thank you all for being here. And Congressman, it is very special to have you with us today and these 2 warriors from the SACO organization. Dan, thank you very much again for having us here, for you joining up with us and hosting your organization. I appreciate that, sir.
Okay, next up is Lynn Grabenstein, president of the SACO Association and a daughter of Richard I. Terpstra, an original SACO veteran.
Good afternoon. I would like to extend a warmest welcome to those in attendance here today. Thank you for gathering to witness the installation of a permanent tribute to SACO's contributions to the Allied World War II effort. My name is Lynn Terpstra Grabenstein, and I am more than proud to be the president of the Sino-American Cooperative Organization, simply known as SACO. SACO was a top-secret military operation in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Many people do not realize that China was an important ally of the United States during that time. SACO's official code name was Project Friendship, aptly named because it was forged by the mutual agreement of President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. It was an amazing military achievement, made possible only because friendship was truly its basis. Friendship was a secret to its power and the code name that protected its members. SACO was headed by 2 men after Pearl Harbor. One was the American, then a commander, Rear Admiral Milton Miles, who was fondly referred to as Mary by his men. The other was the director of the program, General Dai Li. He was head of the Chinese Secret Service. These 2 men themselves had a special relationship built on trust. SACO was the only operation in World War II to have a policy of total immersion. The 2,900 or so Army, Marine, and mostly Navy sailors lived, led, trained, and fought alongside tens of thousands of Chinese nationalist troops in China, behind enemy lines, and hundreds of miles from supplies. They were incredibly brave and resourceful. Because they often operated behind enemy lines, the American SACO soldiers were assigned an unseen Chinese protector to make sure nothing happened to them. They depended on one another for survival. There were meteorologists, frogmen, underwater demolition teams, radio intelligence, and search and rescue personnel working with and training the Chinese. The Americans became adept at disguise, and guided by the Chinese, could slip back and forth through enemy lines at will. They learned how to walk properly, taking little steps, grew their hairline, wore peasant clothing, no uniforms. They wore straw hats and sandals while balancing a long shoulder pole with a radio in the front basket and a machine gun in the back basket. Walking miles with their Chinese shadow protectors, they would pass multiple Chinese or Japanese checkpoints along the way. During the months and years, not one was detected. Eventually, 97,000 intelligence guerrillas and 20,000 saboteurs and pirates were trained. Approximately 71,000 Japanese military personnel died during their mission, while there were only 5 or fewer Americans that either died or were killed. They became known as the SACO Tigers, and the outfit was nicknamed the Rice Paddy Navy. Their motto, what the hell? My dad was one of those guys. He was underage when he enlisted and signed up for hazardous duty like the rest of them. After the war, the Chinese anti-communist nationalists relocated to the island of Formosa, now Taiwan. Project Friendly was finally declassified, and the activities and contributions of SACO remained little known here in the United States. But these men and their deeds continue to be remembered, studied, and honored in Taiwan. There's even a museum in Taipei dedicated to their memory. The Taiwanese Military Intelligence Bureau has joined us during annual reunions for almost 70 years. Our relationship stands as a shining example of all that is good and right in a chaotic world, and truly embodies perpetually the original spirit of Project Friendship. The stated mission of those original veterans and their families, sons and daughters, nieces and nephews, and now grandchildren and great-grandchildren, is to pass on to posterity our knowledge of SACO and to educate the public in what SACO did to help win a victory in World War II. Our bylaws also stress that the members of the SACO Corporation, by our own actions and by our heritage, know that liberty has not, is not, or ever will be free, and will, by our actions, encourage and demonstrate pride in our country and its armed forces, and for the preservation of liberty in the United States and the world. It is notable that James Honeycutt, an original vet and father of our SACO vice president, was ordered to enter Shanghai in 1945 to establish radio communication in preparation for a U.S. invasion. Once set up, they received communication that the war had ended, whereupon they went next door to the German embassy and confiscated the 5 remaining Nazi flags, one of which was donated to the SACO Museum in Taipei. Members representing this museum grace us with their presence here today. It is our pleasure and honor to bequeath a copy of the SACO plaque at Mount Soledad to them for their museum. In closing, thank you for providing this opportunity. It means so much to the memory of those who served so well. Please stand with me now, silently, with your hand over your heart, for a moment of reflection and respect during the playing of taps. You may be seated. Our next speaker graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy and flew the Air Force's A-10A Warthog and other attack aircraft during his 30-year military career. He was an A-10 wing commander and squadron commander and commanded Afghanistan's largest base and Iraq's second largest Air Force base in the global war on terrorism. After 4 combat tours and 80 A-10 combat missions, he is now a military historian and author please welcome Colonel Gregory Marston.
This is a plaque dedications in honor of SACO, a secret Navy organization that served in the CBI, or China-Burma Indo Theater, in World War II. SACO, as you know, is the abbreviation for the Sino-American Cooperative Organization, was the most important unit working in China during this monumental conflict. This inauguration also honors the nationalist Chinese, now based in Taiwan, one of America's great allies in World War II. The nationalist Chinese contributed greatly to the Allied costs, but at an immense price to her people before and during the war. It is little known today, except outside this group, but in July 1937, 4 years before Pearl Harbor, the Japanese army invaded China and quickly captured its capital, Peking, which is now Beijing. This was the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War, in which China fought Japan alone. The Japanese had 3 operating principles in China: burn all, kill all, loot all. This was a military invasion and a genocidal campaign against the Chinese people. For the first year, the Japanese military, with overwhelming air power, won victory after victory, conquering vast tracts of eastern China and every seaport. The Chinese national government and military retreated into the rugged and mountainous areas of western China and then built the famous Burma Road, a land route from Burma to western China. This land supply from the west kept China in the war and allowed it to launch a guerrilla campaign against Japan. Their guerrilla campaign worked and kept over 70% of Japan's army fighting in China. For over 8 years, 1937 to 45, Japan couldn't win in China, nor could they leave. After the Japanese attacked the U.S. Navy fleet in Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, China became a critical ally to America, Britain, and the Soviet Union against the Axis power, which is Germany, Italy, and Japan, our opponents in World War II. Unfortunately, supplying China became extremely difficult when Japan cut the Burma Road in April 1942. The only supply route to China was via American cargo aircraft flying over the Himalaya Mountains, a treacherous route that severely limited our aid. That was called flying the hump. SACO was formed on April 15, 1943, when U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the Chinese nationalists, signed an agreement for each nation to help each other to win the war against Japan. As you've heard, SACO had over 2,900 personnel, mostly Navy sailors, but from every service stationed in China near the then capital of Chongqing. They were nicknamed the SACO Tigers or the Rice Paddy Navy. SACO personnel lived and worked with the Republic of Chinese military forces for the entire length of the war. Their main objective was to assist the Chinese in defeating the huge numbers of Japanese soldiers which occupied large portions of their country. SACO made the most of this teeny logistical stream via air into China. Their main objective was to organize, train, and equip the Chinese military and to provide weather and intelligence reports from across China, including occupied areas. SACO greatly improved the nationalist Chinese army, training and organizing over 115,000 Chinese guerrillas, pirates, and saboteurs. By the end of the war, these Chinese forces had killed tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers and destroyed hundreds of bridges, locomotives, ships. Despite a lack of resources and with limited manpower, SACO pulled far above its weight by helping the nationalist Chinese military and keeping China in the war. SACO also gathered and sent thousands of critical weather and intelligence reports, which greatly helped the Pacific Theater. They did great things through inspired leadership, hard work, innovation, and working closely with the Chinese nationalist military and her people. The next honorees for this memorial are the Republic of Chinese military forces and the Chinese people themselves. China tied up and sapped the energy of most of Japan's army from 1937 until the end of the war. China also helped the CBI theater by sending 2 armies to Burma to help stop the Japanese invasion into India in 1944. Due to this help from China, the United States had time to grow its military and convert its colossal industrial power towards a war footing. America built a military with over 11 million personnel, along with gigantic armadas of ships, aircraft, tanks, bombers, and eventually atomic weapons. The U.S. was the main Allied fighting force in the Pacific and fought numerous bloody battles there. However, if Japan had been able to redeploy millions of their soldiers bogged down in China to the Pacific theater, it would have greatly impacted the U.S. campaign there, costing tens of thousands of additional Americans killed and wounded. Finally, we must thank and honor the Chinese people for their enormous sacrifices before and during World War II. For instance, local Chinese villagers helped rescue and return to America almost all the famous Doolittle Raiders in April 1942, but at the cost of an estimated 250,000 Chinese civilians killed by Japan for this assistance. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese laborers hand-built the Burma Road and many of the U.S. Army Air Corps airfields used to bomb Japan. China suffered enormously, with over 14 million dead due to combat, starvation, disease, Japanese terror bombings, atrocities, and even biological warfare. Over 100 million Chinese were also displaced as refugees from their homes and villages. Furthermore, much of China itself was destroyed in the war. It is impossible to comprehend the terrors and depredations that they so bravely faced by the Chinese people during these years. Today, we honor SACO, the Republic of Chinese Military Forces now based in Taiwan, and the Chinese people for their immeasurable contribution in World War II. World War II ended sooner and with far fewer losses for America because the nationalist Chinese were our allies in the war, but at enormous cost to themselves and their nation. Thank you.
I am now pleased to introduce Captain Todd Perry as our next speaker. He retired in May after 40 years of active duty naval service as a Navy SEAL. Todd is now serving as the Executive Director of the Navy SEAL Experience, a long-awaited project to build a U.S. Navy SEAL interactive museum in San Diego, where all our Navy SEALs are currently trained. It is home to over a dozen SEAL, SEAL boat, and SEAL support commands. Thank you, Captain Perry. We welcome you.
Thank you, Lynn. Hey, there's too many to thank here, but I'm going to have to hit a couple real big here. Obviously, Neil for running the Mount Soledad, and for Lynn and Dan for the SACO. I tell you, our SACO vets that came here, you guys are my heroes. I can't stress that enough. And then really our Taiwanese delegation. I mean, that's a long flight, so thank you for coming out here. This is it's incredible. So I got to admit, I've always been a pretty big history buff and kind of thought I knew my history, especially military history and naval special warfare history. But you know, it wasn't until my 39th year of being in the Navy that I heard about SACO. And that was from a SEAL veteran named Ben Milligan, who wrote a book, By Water Beneath the Walls, and he had an entire chapter on it. It was fascinating. And after reading that, I wanted more. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn more about SACO. I wanted to learn more about, you know, some of the legends on our side. Phil Bucklew and Doug and Halpern, Buck Halpern, I'm sorry. Ironically, both of them played in the NFL. And after Pearl Harbor, they said, we got to fight for a better cause. So a couple of heroes in our history that I had to read about. And then I found this really interesting article. It was in a World War II magazine just a few years ago. And the name of the article was called How Naked World War II Sailors Ended Up Riding Mongolian Ponies in the Gobi Desert to Shoot Bazookas at the Japanese. I don't know if anybody else read that. About 5 pages. I highly recommend all the above. Milligan's book and that article were fascinating. And I really recommend you read those if you want to know more about it. And again, it was true unconventional warfare, true UW. I mean, you talk about the total immersion, learning the customs, learning how to insult, your hosts. It was a huge task. And they did this not just in China, but it was required in India and Burma as well, because that's how they came in through those roads through India and Burma. So it wasn't necessarily special tactics and equipment that led to this success. It was a breed of very special men, a common man with an uncommon desire to succeed, men with mental and physical toughness and courage, men who could adapt quickly in a challenging environments, men with resiliency and endurance, who understood the value of teamwork and especially partner relationships. So in closing, while this mission remained classified for many decades, we now have a lasting memorial to the service of the brave men who supported this effort. And that's American and Chinese, Taiwan, that supported that efforts. And like I said earlier, likely the largest of its kind in U.S. military history. This monument provides us with a U.S. memorial on Mount Soledad to complement the SACO Museum in Taipei, which, by the way, is now on my bucket list. And SACO will soon be memorialized further here in San Diego with a Navy SEAL Museum. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Duncan Hunter Sr., who represented San Diego as a U.S. Congressman from 1981 until 2009, and served as the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee from 2002 until 2006. During the Vietnam War, Duncan held the rank of First Lieutenant, participating in 24 helicopter assaults, and was awarded the Bronze Star and Air Medal. Please welcome Duncan Hunter Sr.
I don't know whether to wear this hat. My wife said you got to wear it for the sun, like a lot of other guys. But maybe I'll keep it off here. Thank you so much, Lynn. But ladies and gentlemen, I've spoken at a lot of events. I've never heard such a great historic summation of a group than we've just heard from Colonel Marston and Captain Perry. Let's thank them for this picture they just painted of SACO, because it's not just a history of a group, it's a history of two countries. And what I thought I would do, having listened to that great recital of what SACO is and what it did for our country, let me just go to the present and the future and what we're facing, and what the descendants and the forces of Chiang Kai-shek, men and women, are facing, who still live on an island called Taiwan. Today, and I think that goes very effectively with the message that I always get coming to Mount Soledad, because the message from these thousands of men and women who are on these walls, and from all of those at the national cemeteries across America, places like Rosecrans and the Miramar Annex, and Arlington Cemetery, and the Normandy Cemetery, and thousands of others in small unmarked graves across the world where American forces projected our power. The message is, be strong and be ready, and try to prevent war wherever you can, while continuing to follow the American interest. The American interest is always to help those who want to keep their freedom or who seek freedom. We don't always win, We don't always prevail and we can't do everything, but we help where we can. And right now we have a practical mission in front of us. That practical mission is for Taiwan to be strong enough to resist an invasion. And that means that you got to spend money. And that means also that you need to use that great product of freedom. And that product of freedom is called technology. As Winston Churchill once said, and I'm paraphrasing him, he said it's so good and such a blessing that the free world, that free men are able to produce technology that protects us against very large forces. And of course, he was talking about the technologies that were developed in World War II. So Taiwan must focus on that technology and focus on spending money and spending a lot of energy developing a force that is strong enough that they can deter an attack. That's the issue of the day. And you know, remembering wars is always about the future. And a lot of what you just heard on this great history that our two military leaders just gave us of SACO, a lot of those lessons, the idea that we're able to leverage resources and train people and disperse some technology, but also to teach people operations so that they could undertake them themselves. It's a great lesson there for the future. Right now, Taiwan must grab this opportunity, this breathing space that they have, to strengthen up, to use technology smartly, to leverage their capability and their great economic power, because Taiwan right now has great economic power. A lot of that has to be transformed into the ability to defend themselves. So that's my message, my brief commercial. So thank you for letting me be in this very honored spot today. And I remember when I came into Congress, 1980, January morning, and I got up there late because I had work to do back here, and I ran out on the Capitol steps, and Ronald Reagan was giving his inaugural address, and he gave a great address, one of the greatest speeches I've ever heard. And when he ended, he told about a man from another war, World War I. And that man's name was Martin Treptow. And he said Martin Treptow was a guy that had a barber shop in Chicago when World War I started. So he left his barber shop and he joined the Rainbow Division in France, got over there after a brief training, and after he'd been there about 3 weeks, he was killed. When Martin Treptow's buddies found his body, they found that he had written a little diary. And the last words of the diary said, "I must fight this war as if the success or failure of my country depends on me alone." And I thought about that charge that Ronald Reagan gave all of us in 1980 to go out and help our country as if the success of our country depended on us, each of us alone. And as I reflected on these great SACO men and what they did behind enemy lines for so long and with such great effectiveness, I have to think that you came closer than almost any of us to meeting that charge and that obligation that Martin Treptow laid out in that simple diary in World War I. Thank you for letting me be with you. God bless you.